Hello everybody, welcome back to our IELTS Grammar Masterclass course. So we are taking a look at tenses at the moment. So if that sounds good to you, then this is definitely the video that you want to stick around for. Today we're going to look at the past simple and the past continuous tense. So you might have an idea of how they both are formed and what they're both used for, but we're going to look at them both separately, and so you can really, by the end of this video, you'll be able to distinguish between them and feel confident using them both. And of course we'll be talking about any IELTS examples and tips along the way. Okay, so let's get started. Let's begin with the past simple. Okay, so what is the past simple used for? Well, it's used to describe completed actions or events. You guessed it, in the past. So, it's often used with, say, specific time expressions or time stamps, such as yesterday, last year, or maybe a year, like in 2005, for example. Now, let's think about the equation. So, we've got our subject, and then we follow the subject with the base form of the verb. And so that is the root form of the verb, if you like, plus an ed for regular verbs. Now, this is important because we'll talk about irregular verbs later, but we want that ed on the end of regular verbs. Okay, so I think we should look at some examples here. Let's see. I visited Paris last summer. So we've got that specific time phrase last summer because it would be perfectly okay to say I visited Paris. I would understand what you mean and the context a little bit, but it's really essential for the full clarity, for the full meaning, to have a timestamp. So with the past simple, so I think either at the beginning or the end of the sentence, you can really be specific with when this event happened. She walked a lot that month. So we have this ed at the end. The green is the root form, the base form of the verb. Then we add that ed, and of course she and I are the subjects in these two different sentences. And we've got another one. They played tennis many times together. So again, it would make sense to a degree if you were to leave out the timestamps, but I really think for the past simple, it's quite crucial to have that specific time to really make sure that it's clear. Okay, so we've got a few rules when we are thinking about the past simple. Verbs ending in E, simply add D. I moved house last summer. So move, that ends with the E, so we can just add the D for this one. She graduated from university in 2010. Again, graduate ends in an E, so we just add that D. They lived in London for 5 years. Live ends in E, so we add the D. Okay, so that's one rule to think about. What's another one? One syllable verbs, so a syllable, like one syllable verbs with a single vowel followed by a single consonant. Oh, okay, let's think about this. It's a bit wordy. So a single vowel, vowels are our A, E, I, O, U. So we want to have a vowel and then a consonant are all the other letters that aren't vowels. What we want to do here is we want to double the final consonant before adding that ED. This is a bit easier to show in practice. Okay, so here we have our vowel O and our consonant P. So we've added another P before we've added our ED. So you can see that. She stopped going to the gym. They planned a big party upon their return. So plan, we put another N in there and then we add our ed. We hopped from bar to bar. Hopped, adding a P and then our ed. If you were to take the P out, that would be hoped. So you're actually changing the word there. So this is an important rule to note. Okay, another rule for 2-syllable verbs, so 2 beats, like a clap, you can think about it like clap, clap. For 2-syllable verbs, with the stress on the last syllable, so the emphasis on the last syllable, double the final consonant before adding ed. Oh, okay, so it's the same rule as before. For example, I preferred to take the bus. Preferred. So the stress is on the R section, the second syllable, if you like. I preferred to take the bus. The bank permitted my actions. So it's quite subtle, but you can hear the emphasis on the end of the word, or the base form of the word, preferred, permitted. So we double that consonant and then add the ed. A strange sequence of events occurred. Again, that emphasis is on the second syllable with the R, so we double the R and add the ed. Right, so equation-wise then, we want to think about irregular verbs now. So this is tricky because there's no rules for irregular verbs, it's just a case of learning them. So we want our subject and then we want the past tense form of that irregular verb, whatever that may be. Examples. He ate lunch at 12 o'clock. So eats becomes ate. And like I was saying, there's no easy way to learn these. It's just a case of learn by heart. They ran to the shops. Ran being the past tense for run. We saw a movie on Saturday. See becomes saw for past tense. The good thing is with most irregular verbs is that we use them fairly regularly, which is ironic because even though they're irregular verbs, they're quite frequent in speech and writing. So there's a high chance that you'll just naturally pick them up the more you use them anyway, so that's a positive there. Okay, so to form a negative in the past simple, we want to use the auxiliary verb did, so that's it, the auxiliary verb do, but in the past tense form, followed by not, and we can contract this to create didn't, and then we're actually following this with the base form of the main verb. So let's see this in action. I did not, or in other words, I didn't play tennis yesterday. So we don't want to say I didn't played tennis yesterday. We're expressing the past tense with did not, so we can follow that with the base form. So this is just something to be aware of because it can be quite confusing, the fact that we want to use the base form of the verb here. She didn't study for the exam last night. They didn't visit the museum last week. So both are absolutely fine, did not and didn't. That's no problem at all. Okay, regular verbs then. We want to use did not or didn't, and then the base form of the irregular verb. So just like how we use the correct irregular verb, it's just a case of knowing them, learning them off by heart. We just want to use the base form of that irregular verb for the negative. I didn't go to the store this morning. So go, you can see to go is the infinitive there. Went is the past tense form, but we switch it back to go when we're doing a negative. He didn't eat lunch at 12 o'clock. Eats becomes ate in the past tense, but here we use eat. We didn't see the movie on Saturday. See being the irregular verb there. So a really good point to note that you don't want to say, I didn't went to the store. We want to use the base form. Okay, so now let's look at interrogatives or questions, in other words. So we're using that did, again, that auxiliary verb, we're really utilising it here. And we're going to place it at the beginning of the sentence, or if it's not at the beginning of the sentence, it has to be before the subject, either at the beginning or within the sentence. So we have did plus subject plus the base form of the main verb. So it's base form again. Let's see in action. We've got a question like, did you play tennis yesterday? There we go, you can see that structure there. Did she study for the exam last night? Did they visit the museum? So did followed by subject followed by the base form of the verb. Like with negatives, we use that base form. Irregular verbs, we want to use did before the subject, and then just as with negatives, you probably can imagine, we want to use the base form of that irregular verb as well. Okay, some examples here. Did I give this to you? So give, past tense becomes gave, so it's irregular, but here we use the base form for the question. Did he know we were going there? No, knew, but we use know in this situation. And the last one, did we break the computer? Break, broke. So those are just a few more irregular verbs to be aware of there. All right, so that was our past simple. I hope that is clear. Quite straightforward, that one. Now let's move on to the past continuous. And you might know how this differs, how this changes, and we'll talk about this in depth. So this will be really useful to compare with the past simple. So what is it used for? What's the purpose of it? Well, it's also known as the past progressive, and it's used to describe ongoing or continuous actions that were happening at a specific point in the past. So this can be confusing actually because it's ongoing even though it was in the past. It's quite an interesting concept to get our heads around, but it's emphasizing the duration or the progress of an action all in the past. So how do we form this past continuous tense then? Well, we want the past tense of the verb to be, so in other words, was or were, and we also want the present participle of the main verb, and that's the one that reflects the continuous nature of this tense, the ongoing nature. So this is a little bit more complex than past simple, I would say. And here's the formula. So you've got the subject plus was, were, depending on what the subject is, whether it's singular or plural, always making sure we're honouring that subject-verb agreement. Then we follow it with the verb. Then we want to add our ing, which is our present participle. Some affirmative examples then. It, subject, was, our verb to be, our auxiliary verb, snowing yesterday. Okay, so what do we gather from this sentence? Well, we gather that it's not snowing anymore. It was an ongoing action that took up some time yesterday. So again, timestamps are really, really useful here to know when this was happening in the past. Not always essential, but very helpful. This one doesn't have a timestamp, but that's okay. They were eating at the restaurant. They, then to be in the past tense matches the subject, so were for the plural, they were eating ing at the restaurant. You were working at the weekend. So we have a timestamp for that one. Right, so let's focus in just to double check on this present participle. What exactly do we mean when we talk about the present participle? Well, this is a word that is derived from a verb. It can also be used as an adjective, but it is primarily used to form the continuous verb tenses. So you'll see this ing with all of the verb tenses that have a continuous nature. And we simply add that ing to the base form of the verb. So walk becomes walking, that's the present participle. Eat becomes eating. So it's fairly straightforward and not anything to I know it can be quite overwhelming when we see the formula, but actually in practice, as long as we add that ing to the main verb, then that's all okay. Okay, so we've got this example here to show you with the auxiliary verb be, and then we've just got a verb here plus that present participle ing. So you can say, I was reading, you were reading, he, she, it was reading, you, we, they, plural, were reading. So you make sure that the be to be matches the subject, and then verb plus ing. So as we were saying, this can be used for ongoing actions or action in the past. For example, I was studying when the phone rang. They were playing video games all night. She was working on her project when her friend came over. And this is quite important to note that sometimes this can be used to express one thing happening simultaneously to another thing happening in the past. So I was studying when the phone rang, two actions overlapping each other. Interrupted actions as well, actually. So she was cooking dinner when the guests arrived. So another action happening whilst the initial action was taking place. We were watching TV when the power went out. So what came first? The watching TV, and then the power going out interrupted that. She was taking a nap when the doorbell rang. So interrupted actions can be expressed through the past continuous. And we've touched upon this, simultaneous actions. So yes, this is different from interrupted. This was at the same time, almost running parallel, if you like. While I was reading, he was writing. They were talking on the phone while I was doing my homework. So you can see this word while is very useful for simultaneous actions. You can also use meanwhile as well. When I was singing, she was playing the guitar. Okay, so two things at once then. And you can think about descriptions of the past. So nice imagery here. The sun was setting as we were driving home. It was raining when I was walking to the bus stop. The stars were shining brightly as we were camping in the wilderness. So three really nice, picturesque, maybe not the second one, but nice images here. We've got our word as, which is a great word to show two things happening. This is really good for storytelling, writing, creating a picture, things like that. And you can also express politeness or softening statements. So instead of saying, could you help me with this? Which is fine, but it could come across quite abrupt depending on the situation. You could say, I was wondering if you could help me with this. That's a bit softer, a bit more calm perhaps, a bit less rushed. We were hoping you might join us. So that's a nice polite way of saying that, we'd like to see you. I was thinking we might go there later. So you can see how these sentences are very polite and they're really nice to ensure that our queries or our thoughts are almost cushioned, so they're not as blunt as perhaps they might be. So this is great for, say, IELTS speaking, when you're speaking with the examiner, in conversation, things like this. Okay, negatives now. So you can form a negative by using to be, past tense, was or were, followed by not and the present participle, that ing. Let's look at some examples. I wasn't studying when the phone rang. So we've got that not there, and we've created a contracted form of that wasn't studying when the phone rang. Plural now, they weren't playing video games all night. We weren't again, contracted form, speaking at the same time. Okay, questions now. So to form a question in the past continuous, you use the past tense of the verb to be, followed by the subject. So we invert the subject and the auxiliary verb to be, and then we follow that by the present participle, so that ing form of the main verb. And we'll see this in action. Was she studying when the phone rang? So there we have our question. If we were to revert it back to a statement, what would we do? Well, we would invert or swap the subject and the verb to be. So we'd swap wasn't she in this situation. But as it is, we want a question, so we start with the verb to be in its past tense form. Were they playing video games all night? Were you working on the project yesterday? Okay, so more examples of some questions there. Right, so at the end of today's video, we're going to just do a quick IELTS focus to see how you can use these tenses in practice. Past simple there, and we're going back to the first half of the video, a speaking example. So you could be asked, tell me about a trip you took to a different city or country. And this might be an answer. Certainly. Last summer, I visited Paris, and it was an incredible experience. I explored iconic landmarks like the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre Museum. The weather was perfect, and I met some amazing people along the way. It was definitely one of the most enjoyable trips I've ever had. So our task is to see if we can spot the past simple. Have a quick look, see how many examples you can find here, and then we'll go through them together. Okay, here we go. So these are all I've just highlighted the main verb here. We have verbs like visited, explored, it was, the weather was perfect, I met, it was. And you can use it in task 1, so you can say sentences depending on, of course, what your data is, but you could say, between 2000 and 2010, the overall population of the city witnessed a steady increase, reaching a peak of 1.5 million residents in the year 2010. So you're presenting the data here. In contrast to the decline in traditional manufacturing jobs, the service sector experienced significant growth throughout the 1990s. So you're making comparisons there. Okay, can you see any past simple in these examples here? Have a think, have a look. Okay, let's go through them together. So the first one here, we've got witnessed. We've added an S and then our ED. And the second one, we have experienced. That's the past simple form of the verb. And now let's go into past continuous. So you could be asked, describe a memorable event from your childhood. What were you doing and how did it make you feel? When I was around 10 years old, I vividly remember a camping trip my family took to the mountains. As we set up the tents, I was exploring the surroundings and collecting firewood. While my parents were preparing dinner, my siblings and I were running around and playing near the campsite. Okay, have a look. Can you see we're thinking about past continuous now? So can we remember the formula? What do we need? What's important with past continuous? And can you see any examples? Let's see if you were right. So we have examples like I was exploring. So we have the subject plus the past tense form of the verb to be. It's that present participle of the main verb. My parents were preparing dinner as well. Is another example of the past continuous. Okay, so task 1, you can also use this tense. You could say something like, during the period from 2000 to 2010, the city's population was steadily increasing, with a notable rise in residential development projects. Or you might say, while traditional manufacturing jobs were declining, the service sector was experiencing significant growth throughout the 1990s. Right, any past continuous here? How do we spot it? Can you see it at all? Let's have a look. Okay, so task 1 then. City's population was steadily increasing. That's an example of past continuous. And the second one had 2 actually. Jobs were declining, the service sector was experiencing. So you can see how this tense can come up in all different parts of the IELTS exam. And of course you can combine the tenses together. Last summer I was enjoying a peaceful vacation by the beach when I received an unexpected call that completely changed my plans. So you can see that the blue is the past continuous here, I was enjoying, and the green is the past simple. Another one, as I was walking through the historical district, I stumbled upon an old bookstore that sold rare editions, and I immediately knew I had found a hidden gem. Okay, so both of these examples really show that you can combine the tenses. These are great speaking examples if you're in conversation, maybe writing examples as well. And that brings us to the end of today's video. So we've discussed in-depth past simple and past continuous. Hopefully you are now confident in when you can use the two, what they are used for, how to form them, and how maybe you can interweave them into your IELTS practice. I think you'll do that naturally anyway. So I hope that's been useful for you. Great to have you along today, and we'll see you next time.